record dinner about a homestay. Now, it wasn't at a homestay, it was about a homestay. We'll get into that here in a second. To set the story up, in my little area, I had a 7-Eleven at the end of the alleyway or roadway. And I went to that 7-Eleven all the time, multiple times a week. It wasn't like the kind of 7-Eleven that we have here in America. 7-Elevens there are a different animal. They're very clean, they have a lot of healthy food options, and they have a huge variety of stuff that you would need in a daily life type of situation. And they would get food orders multiple times a day, like the fresh pre-made food. So I think 3 to 4 times a day, their computer system was hooked up with the local distribution center. So anytime they were running low on a particular item, they knew to include it in the next order. And so all day long, we would have fresh food. So I would spend a lot of time there getting snacks and meals and fresh juices and whatnot. And there was a clerk there that was a big guy. He was a muscular, kind of chubby, big dude. Even for American standards, he's a big dude. He wasn't tall, he was really short, but he was big. It was unique, and he was my age. He was a little bit older than me, but he was around my age, which was also very unique. In my town, there was primarily grandparents and elementary school kids. People in their 20s had gone away to college, or they'd gone away to a trade school or a fishery school, or they had started working in Tokyo or Chiba City. So there weren't a lot of people like me out there, so he was a unique guy in that regard. And I'd see him all the time when I'd go there, and he was always very shy. You know, he had a 7-Eleven little vest on, and he had his eyebrows groomed, and he was really nice. And then after about a year or so of going in there, and he had known I was friendly, actually quite friendly with the proprietor, Mr. Oki-san. And he finally got the nerve up one day and said, "Hey, you know, Brendan, what do you think about Korean barbecue?" And I knew why he was asking me. There's no reason someone would just ask me about Korean barbecue. He was going to ask me to go to Korean barbecue. I'd been in Japan long enough to know that's what was going to happen. So I said, "Hey man, I love Korean barbecue. I'd never heard of it before I moved to Japan, but I tell you what, I love it now. And I understand why it's so popular in Japan." He said, "Great. How about joining me for dinner next week for some Korean barbecue?" I said, "Sure. Let's go." Now, I said sure, but in my mind I was a little bit hesitant because I had developed a bit of a routine there. I wanted to be outgoing and open to all types of experiences, yet I had to be very particular about who I hung out with and when I hung out with them. I lived my life in a life like under a microscope there, and so I knew that people were going to talk about me, and if they got information about me, they would tell everybody, and the gossip mill would just go wild. So I needed to be very careful about where I spent my time. Not that I was doing anything bad, I just got tired of everybody knowing everything about me all the time. It gets a little bit exhausting. So I said, "Sure, you know, why not? Let's do it." So he said, "Hey, do you know where the karaoke place is over by the Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant on the east part of town?" And I said, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I've never been there before, but I know what you're talking about." He said, "I hear it's really good. Let's go there." I said, "Great, meet you there." Well, you know, I knew I was committed at that point. I gave him my word. I had to be there on time. I couldn't reschedule. You know, mobile phones were still early in those days. I definitely did not have one. He might have had one, I don't know, but I had to be there. So the day comes, I get on my little granny bike, I ride over, we start eating dinner, and we start having like the icebreaker conversations of, you know, where in America are you from, and what are your hobbies? And the hobbies question always comes out. It's an easy icebreaker for Japanese people. They'll ask you about Japanese food. I told him my hobbies, you know, music and all that good stuff, and riding bicycles. And I said, "What about you?" And he surprised me. He said, "Do you know pro wrestling?" And I said, like on the television, like American style pro wrestling?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "That's what I like." I said, "Do you like to watch it?" He said, "Well, yeah, I like to watch it," but he said, "I like to do it also." And I said, "You do pro wrestling?" He said, "Yeah, there's a local group of amateurs around here, and we we practice pro wrestling, and we take part in tournaments sometimes. And my mind was blown. I thought to myself, wow, I didn't know this existed outside of America. I had no idea. Now, little did I know there was a rich history of pro wrestling in Japan after World War II, but I didn't know at the time. So I was fascinated. I was like, oh, no wonder he's a big guy. He's into wrestling. Hey, makes sense. So we started talking about that and how much he liked it. And he said it was tiring and he had a big appetite because of that. And he needed to train, go to the gym a lot to do it. And it was really interesting. I had no idea. And I had no idea that he had done that. To me, he was just the shy 7-Eleven clerk with groomed eyebrows. So we were chatting, and he said, you want to get another round of food, another round of drinks? I said, sure, yeah, let's do it. And so we kept on eating. And then he shifted gears and said, hey, have you ever done a homestay? I said, no, I'd never done a homestay before. And I'd come to learn that homestays were a popular phenomenon in Japan. That people did them, people loved them. It's very common for people to spend a month in Australia or spend 6 months in England or, Oregon or something. Canada, Vancouver. I said, no, have you done a homestay before? He said, no, I've never done a homestay. I've always wanted to. I said, oh, cool. He said, hey, well, what about you? And I said, oh, no, I've never done one. I understand it'd be great, but, I'm too old now because, homestays generally are for younger people, for junior high kids, high school kids, maybe even college age kids, but it's not all that common for adults to do. And he said, how about helping me do a homestay in America? And I said, wow, I don't really know how that would work. I don't know how to do that. And I was thrown off guard a little bit. I said, I don't know of any companies that do that. I said, I remember there was a company called AFS in the 80s that existed because my friend in junior high, they hosted a guy, I think Sven or something like that, from Switzerland. And he came over, or Jens or something. He came over from Switzerland. He was high school age. And we got to know him, and then he returned. But other than the AFS organization, I didn't really know. And he said, no, I mean a homestay with your family. I was surprised. I was like, my family? What? Like homestay? And it was a lot to process because it hit me that that's what he was asking me to dinner for. He wanted to have a homestay in America, and I was his chance to do that. I knew he was asking me to dinner for some reason, but I wasn't sure what, and I would not have predicted it was to get a homestay with my family. So I was processing that in real time, and processing his perspective, which was home life in Japan was generally very predictable. 2-parent family, mom does traditional mom roles, dad does traditional dad roles, so homestays could slot in pretty easily with kids, no problem. I was going through the indexes in my head of, well, I didn't have a traditional family life growing up. I had a single mother and a brother, and mom didn't stay home and make dinner for us and clean the house. Like, she was working. We had moved out of the house. We weren't kids anymore, so she was living alone and working, and so homestay was just not even part of the conversation. I was having to navigate this in my brain in real time. And I was trying not to make him lose face, but he was slowly losing face as each second passed, because as I tried to explain to him the situation of where I was from and where I was raised and what home life really was like, it was confusing for him because I was having a hard time finding the words, and he had a hard time understanding because he didn't understand what that life was like. Life wasn't like the movies. It wasn't like how it was in Japan. It was its own thing in America. At least for me, it was a very unique thing. I was feeling bad in the moment because I was thinking, oh man, this was his big chance to ask for a homestay, and this is why he was buying me this nice dinner, and I felt bad in the moment and frustrated that I couldn't explain it to him, and I also was a little irritated too because he didn't know me, and he was asking to have my family host a stranger for weeks or months. I didn't know the guy, and I was thrown off a little bit, and I thought, wow, like, it was strange and it was awkward. And, you know, we finished up dinner, and I thanked him for dinner, and it was really nice. And he said, you know, hey, won't you think about it? I said, well, you know, I can think about it, but it doesn't really change the situation. You know, there's no kids in the house for you to hang out with. You're older than me. You're an adult. To go homestay with a single mom as an adult, it's just weird. It doesn't work, you know? And I was like, I'll think about it, knowing that I wouldn't think about it anymore because nothing was going to change. And it was a really awkward dinner about a homestay. And ever since that dinner, whenever I'd go into 7-Eleven and see him, it was even more awkward than it ever was. His shyness combined with the awkwardness of that dinner where he had struck out, and he just felt really uncomfortable, and it made me feel a little bit uncomfortable too. And I'd gotten over my frustration of him presuming that he could have a homestay with my family, and got over my ego and put myself in his shoes. And I thought, you know what, like, that was his path beyond. He was stretching out his normal routine of the trajectory that his life was going down because he had met this foreigner, and that could be his big chance to get to America for the first time and experience America in the real way. And he had to take that chance and invite me to dinner and ask me. And it didn't work out for him. And that was tough. And it was awkward for me. But he tried. And that was also a path beyond for me. Navigating that conversation in real time, the concept of the homestay with a stranger, and trying to explain the differences of American culture versus Japanese culture and my home life versus his home life and the differences, and doing that in real time in a foreign language, that was tough. That was quite a little journey in my broader journey of living over there. And I think it's those journeys, it's going down those new paths that opens our eyes a little bit and makes us a little more empathetic. You know, I feel bad for the guy because he tried and it didn't work out well for him. Well, that's it for this time of Paths Beyond. Join me next time for another story about being a foreigner, being a fish out of water, being the other, and navigating through that journey. You know,